Welcome back to the Kinguin for Charity Spring Edition 2015. I am Admirable, and joined with me is the Dong himself, Mr. Kevin Monk. And this event is being held in benefit for Child's Play. It's an organization that helps provide toys and games for children in hospitals who otherwise don't have access to them. If you'd like to learn more about Child's Play, you can visit their website at childsplaycharity.org. And if you'd like to make a contribution, you can do so with links below the stream, or if you check the chat, Moobot's got some links for you too, if you want to go from there. So we just saw our second round of the day, Life Coach taking out Alchemist after falling behind by 2 games and able to pick up 3 straight wins with 3 different decks. This is the Conquest format. So you can't just 3-0 someone with Mech Mage or Wazoo and go forward from there. You're going to have to play a few more decks.
Yeah, we saw Alchemist, he lost unfortunately 0-3 with his Warrior, and it just happens to show you just can't bring a weak deck to this format. If you have like 2 decks that are like 90% win rate and you have 1 deck that's 30% win rate against the field, then that deck is gonna let you falter, and you're probably gonna have like a less than 50% win rate in the tournament.
Yeah, having those liabilities in your lineup is something you definitely want to trim out. But coming up in our third match of the day, these are 2 guys who really need no introduction to competitive Hearthstone. It is Savjz versus Thijs. And wow, I mean, you take a look at the wins from these guys that they've put up in tournaments. It's incredible. Thijs, one of, I think, his biggest notable things was that he actually held 9 weeks of King of the Hill on iHearthU, and he was not facing a shortage of opponents. It was just amazing player after amazing player being thrown at him. And granted, they're single match, they're best of 7, but to win 9 straight, I mean, that's basically one of these major tournament wins that you guys have been seeing. Mm-hmm. But to go along with his major tournaments, though, he also won DreamHack Bucharest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not only that, Savjz is also in a kind of a similar boat. He was also first introduced to the scene by the iHearthU King of the Hill. He won 4 in a row, I believe, in some of the very first iHearthU King of the Hill matches, and that just propelled him to so many greater things, such as ESGN, such as OGN, such as C-Story Cup, all tournaments that he did very well in.
Yeah, he won a lot of the smaller tournaments that were being held at the time, too. Early on in Hearthstone, he was just an absolute dominant force. And he's put together, a string of top 4s and top 8s in other tournaments outside of that. But now it's these guys, and they're facing off in this match right here. And their lineups, I'm not really too sure how this is going to match up because they're actually identical mirror matches in terms of the classes that they brought. Thijs brought Mage, Rogue, Druid, and Savjz also brought Mage, Rogue, Druid. And so now within that, to see where the differences come about. Now, from what I understand, Savjz actually has liked to play Freeze Mage a lot in the past, even when there were other strategies available. But sort of recently, I've been seeing him take really aggressive tones with a lot of the decks he's been building.
Yeah, way back in the day, he used to love Freeze Mage. Somewhat more recently, he tinkered around with Fatigue Mage a bit, and even more recently after that, he's been playing a lot of Mech Mage because he's just seeing how strong it is and how it can just take wins off of any other deck, just like Zoo in the past, just like Hunter in the past. As you mentioned, Hunter, or rather Rogue, Druid, and Mage are going to be the 3 decks for both players, and I'm not surprised there, as I think those are 3 decks or 3 classes that most people would say are some of the strongest and at the top of the metagame right now. In fact, in this very tournament, they are the 3 most popular classes. Out of the 16 players in the tournament, 10 are bringing Rogue, 10 are bringing Druid, and 6 are bringing Mage, so definitely well represented there.
Yeah, it's not really surprised, I think, to see that many people bring it. The thing I'm most surprised about is actually Druid and Rogue both being more popular than Mage. I would have assumed that Druid would have been the most popular. It's been a while since we actually seen Druid really not represented in tournament lineups. It's just been so strong and consistent pretty much throughout competitive Hearthstone. Mage is, again, at one of those points where it's one of those decks that you just have to be able to beat in a tournament lineup, whether it was the old Pyroblast Mages or the Freeze Mages, or just like you said recently, it was even Fatigue Mage was making a really big splash in competitive scenarios. But now we're at this point where we're seeing players play Mage again, but it's in this more aggressive manner. It really was the deck to beat, and I think what ended up happening is it actually became so much of the deck to beat that it got targeted so heavily, you're just not seeing as much of it played. So I guess that can factor into players' decisions, but I'm still a little bit surprised to not have seen as much Mage as we've basically been seeing, even though we can take a look at what's happening here.
Yeah. speaking of mage versus mage, our first matchup is going to be that mage mirror matchup, and whoever wins this match is going to have a pretty sizable advantage. Even though they might win with mech mage, they won't be able to use it in the future, but still having a 1-0 lead is still very substantial.
Yeah, so being a loser here, not the worst thing in the world, because you still have your mech mage available to you. And I think if there's a matchup where you're kind of okay with losing to mech mage, it's probably the mech mage mirror, because you still have a strong deck left. It didn't really get to counter anything. It's like, I feel like in Conquest, it's like one of those weird formats where losing in the mirror is not like the worst thing in the world, where like in Last Hero Standing, losing in a mirror was just like devastating to your lineup.
Yeah, I don't think the Conquest format is very well understood yet. This is, of course, only the second tournament that has featured the Conquest format in the Western scene right now, and probably the first tournament that's very widely watched, that has just so many top players playing it in the exact format of Best of 5. So this will be really a preview of what BlizzCon 2015 will look like.
Yep. So pretty strong draw here with the Goblin Blast Mage. I imagine this Cogmaster is going to run into Spider Tank beforehand. I don't think he's going to risk losing damage here, and I really don't think he's going to risk trying to hit it with 4 missiles. But man, what a blowout that would be. He just jams down the Blast Mage, and it just hits the Spider Tank 4 times. There's also the minor risk that none of the missiles hit the Spider Tank too. I mean, that's something else he's a little bit concerned with, but I think it's well worth the risk.
Yeah, in aggro versus aggro matchups, a lot of it just comes down to who can get board control the fastest. Mech Mage, like Zoo previously before it, is more of a board control deck, as opposed to something like Hunter, which is more about going to face and just killing your opponent. So right now, Savjz is at a distinct disadvantage right now. He doesn't have board control, and the minions that are on the board for his opponent are very substantial. A 2-drop and a 4-drop, essentially. So he's out-tempoed right now by at least 6 mana.
Yeah, this is not the position he wants to be in. So Cogmaster is going to try to absorb an attack from one of these guys, a Mirror Entity. He's hoping, I think, this Mirror Entity will just slow down his opponent a little bit. Which, if we look at Thijs's hand, it actually might. Yeah, so he's going to play a Mirror Entity of his own to kind of, this really is a counterplay to this tempo. And he's even got Archmage in hand. So Savjz able to not give his opponent too much value from his opponent's Mirror Entity. Thijs doesn't really have that liberty right now. Gosh, if he just saves that Cogmaster. But Cogmasters would be a good minion for his opponent right now, so I don't think it matters too much.
Yeah, I think the Snow Chugger is alright. The freeze effect isn't typically that relevant in this matchup, and you can still play out your curve. Not only that, you activate your opponent's Mirror Entity while you still have one on your side, so just a lot of pressure put on your opponent's side of the field right now. 9 points of damage available for Thijs, though, and when you're chunking off half of your opponent's life, bad things can definitely... He can actually go for more than that too. He has access to 11, which would put Savjz in fireball range. But he's not developing his board after that, so he does have to consider the trade-off. But Thijs is at 30. I mean, maybe he just has more than enough time to go for something like that. I think in this scenario, you can even afford to develop your Mechanical Yeti, because the Mechanical Yeti represents another minion that your opponent has to deal with. And with that 5 health, nothing on the board can deal with it very well. It's not like your opponent's Mechanical Yeti that he gets will be able to trade very effectively, right?
Especially if you have multiple 1-health minions on the board. Yeah, he's just... Wow, I'm really surprised by that attack. I would assume he would go full for face. So down to 10. Savjz picks up another Mirror Entity, but he's going to have to make something happen this turn. I would suspect Goblin Blast Mage is going to find its way to the board.
Yeah, what a really great Goblin Blast Mage. He's going to trade his Tinkertown Technician first, so none of the Blast Mage hits go on that.
Yep. Good to make sure he puts the 4 points in the Yeti, too. So potential for perfect clear, doesn't quite get it. So this may change his play to a ping now. I think Savjz has actually done a really good job. He might have stabilized his board at 10 health.
Yeah, he might have stabilized, but still he's still at 10 health, so any combination of spells that Thijs can get could just mean disaster.
Thijs going to pick up a 3rd spare part here. Now the option, Mirror Entity or Mechanical Yeti.
Mirror Entity would actually be quite good for Savjz, because he'll be able to summon a Mad Scientist. And we've already seen 2 Mirror Entities from Thijs, so even if Thijs gets a Mad Scientist in return from the Mirror Entity, it'll still just be essentially a vanilla 2/2 body.
Yeah, he's going to use a Versing Switch here too, just to add a little bit more pressure. I think he's just trying to buy as much time as he can until he can play Archmage and 2 Whirling Blades at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair play. Now Savjz will be forced to weave in hero powers in for every single turn.
Well, Annoyatron may change that. I like Azure Drake and Annoyatron. That looks like a pretty solid one to me.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing too here is if he's thinking about Archmage being in Thijs' hand right now, the timing of this mirror entity matters so much.
That's a very good point. So if mirror entity actually comes down now, there's just so many spare parts for both players, right?
Yeah, each player. Well, Savjz knows that Thijs has got 3 spare parts in his hand. And Thijs knows that Savjz has 4 spare parts in their hand. So they're looking at effectively 4 and 2 card hands here.
I think mirror entity would be actually quite a good play, given that we know Thijs' hand. But can he afford to not develop anything this turn?
That's what I'm thinking of too. I think Azure Drake is probably just a little bit better. But something he's thinking about though is if one of these spare parts is the Finicky Cloak Field, that means Archmage is going to come down this turn. This is a play I was not really suspecting, but this does protect his Blast Mage for another turn. Oh wow, Fireball gets drawn. So that's gonna be Archmage this turn, and I think that's just enough damage to end this game.
Yeah, the only thing that could save Savjz right now is a Loatheb that might come down. But as we said in previous casts, if Savjz is running Azure Drake, then that's the one spot for the 5 mana spot. So if he's running Azure Drake, he's probably not running Loatheb. So this looks to be just pretty much game over for Savjz.
Yeah.
And Thijs will be looking to take game 1 of the series.
You can even just taunt it up just to make sure that he can't die to anything strange. I'm actually surprised he doesn't taunt it up here. Like, I'm extremely surprised.
You know, actually, Black Knight is a card that mech mages, or rather mages, have used before in their decks. But even if it gets Black Knighted, I guess it doesn't really matter. Again, like, there's probably nothing in Savjz's hand that can kill Thijs anyway this turn. He's looking at 28 health right now. What can he do? What can that do, right?
Yeah. So Savjz just going to be forced to put damage into this Archmage, and then they're going to get the bad news. It's going to jump out to a 1-0 lead here. But again, I think losing in the Mech Mage mirror is probably, if you're going to lose with Mech Mage, I think this is probably the best place to do it.
Yeah, hopefully he can steal a win off with, even though Savjz has lost with his Mech Mage, he'll be able to play it next game. And hopefully he'll be able to take off a win off of either the Rogue or the Druid.
The question is how well does this line up? Because I know that Rogue has gained a lot of popularity kind of because of Mech Mage. That's a matchup I'm still sort of on the fence about, and I think what's coming into play more so is just there's so much variation in Rogue. Right now it has so many different lines of attack that I'm just not sure how it pans out yet. Yeah,
I think you ask different people what is favorite, Mech Mage or Rogue, and I think the average player will tell you, you know what, Mech Mage is favorite, it's just so aggressive. Rogue doesn't have a lot of healing, so Mech Mage generally will have the upper hand. But if you ask a lot of those like dedicated Rogue players like Hyped or like Super JJ or Ryzen, those players will tell you that no, Rogue, if you play it right, because Rogue is a very difficult class to play, if you play the class of Rogue right, you can just kill the mages off pretty easily.
Yeah, so interesting to see if he's going to change his deck. Again, Thijs has got Druid and Rogue left, and Savjz has those 2 classes plus Mech Mage now. And gosh, it's pretty tough. I think he's going to go with Mech Mage again.
Ooh.
I lied. He's going to swap it up.
I think going Mech Mage twice in a row was a bit predictable. And I think if he actually got Mech Mage versus Druid in this scenario, it probably would have been pretty good. But he goes for the Rogue instead. Rogue starting off with Edwin Van Cleef, sometimes good, but when you're starting off as player 1, definitely not what you want to see.
It's also not against the Druid too, because you know they're going to have at least 2 silences in their deck with Keeper of the Grove. Thijs, when we see Azure Drake and Loatheb here, this is a pretty big indicator that he is not playing a ramp version, especially when you couple that with Shade X Ramus.
Yeah, these days the ramp versions have pretty much for the most part gone extinct, and I believe the only player who plays ramp versions and wall versions and taunt versions anymore is Strifecrow. Strifecrow has done very well, obviously, in the past few tournaments with his ramp druid, but none of the other players seem to be adapting his style of just Ancients of Wars and Scenariuses and even Sneasel Treaders in Druid.
Yeah, this is an interesting hand from Thijs here too. I mean, when he draws a second Piloted Shredder, he can play a turn 1 Piloted Shredder, but he also has the option to go turn 2 Piloted Shredder and turn 3 Piloted Shredder. So I think this next draw is really going to dictate a lot of what he chooses to do here. But I would venture to say that turn 2 and turn 3 Piloted Shredders is about as good as it's going to get.
Oh yeah, it's just so aggressive. Usually how Rogue deals with it is with the Deadly Poison. But if you're going to Deadly Poison that, you're taking 4 damage to face. And that's just going to get you much closer to lethaling.
Yeah, Savjz does not have a clean answer to this. So SI7 Agent going to come down with no value, just with the intent of beginning to pick these off, these Piloted Shredders, that is. Something else that's interesting to note is that Thijs actually kept Loatheb in his opening hand here. Do you agree with that? Just in the Rogue, do you think that's a Rogue particular card that he kept, or do you think that this is a card that he would ever traditionally be keeping in other matchups?
Oh, definitely. I think it's a Rogue specific keep. Even though Auctioneer is not a card anymore that's in most Rogue decks, Rogues just have so many spells, and they're probably going to use spells on almost every single turn. So a turn 5 Loatheb, just a lot of times it locks your opponent out of the game. And also, not only that, turn 5 Loatheb contests so well against the typical turn 4 Valid Teacher from Rogue. So that's just another good trade that you're looking for as the Druid player.
No action from Thijs this turn. So he's hoping to get something good out of this Piloted Shredder. 3-2 is not bad, but that's definitely in backstab range. I think if he had backstab, though, he would have seen it on the Sun Fury Protector, along with a poke from that dagger. So I think he feels pretty comfortable knowing it's not there.
No, there's always a chance to draw it. Azure Drake is going to come down.
Preparation would be nice. Doesn't get it.
Yeah, Preparation would just be godly at this moment.
Yeah, and 5 drops now, all available. And just like you said, Loatheb might just be like a shutout one here. Yeah, that's what he's going to go for. This is going to be a lot of damage taken from Savjz. That's if he chooses to go with the Loatheb, though. There's a lot of merits to pretty much playing all 3 of these. I think Loatheb's probably the strongest just because you have Savage Draw already in your hand. So every single turn that you get your opponent closer to 14, and the closer you get to drawing a Force of Nature, I mean, that's basically the game that he's trying to put in his pocket right now.
Oh, man. Are we going to see Edwin as a 2-2 coming down right here?
I think so.
I think that might be the only play.
Yeah, he needs to not take 5 damage from Loatheb.
This guy's toast.
He might not have another option, though. Yeah, so he's going to leave the Loatheb alone this turn. So 5 more damage going to get dealt here. Thijs, this is a scary board to be looking at now, because now something like Sharp Sword Oil with a Blade Flurry, that starts to look like it could be a disastrous position to be heading into.
Yeah, I just want to mention, like, this game could have been so different if Savjz had the coin. On turn 3, Savjz was forced to use the SI Agent just as a 3-3 body. If he was able to get the full value out of the SI Agent, look, how different would this game really be?
You also wouldn't have seen turn 2 and turn 3 Piloted Shredders.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the coin, along with Innervates, just allow you to just mold your curve to exactly what you want.
Wow, he's going to use Savage Roar straight away. So that's to take out the Azure Drake. Gets a couple extra points of damage to face. And this is just to make sure this Loatheb is protected from inefficient stuff, as well as keeping Phantom Knives from sweeping out this Shading X Ramus. But Blood Mage Thalnos gets drawn. And this could be the beginning of a turnaround now for Savjz. That's actually a really important draw right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Without the ability to clear the shade, this would have been pretty devastating. If we saw Thijs go straight for 7 to the face the previous turn, and if he does that, then you know Thijs is pretty much close to lethal with the cards remaining in his hand.
I'm curious how badly he wants to pay lives here versus just trading. There's also a possibility he wants his 3-3 instead of this 2-2. Like, oh my gosh. Wow, what an aggressive place from Savjz. He actually recognizes that every point of damage is going to matter right now, so he's just going to try to take a really aggressive stance and end this game before it gets to a relevant point. Thijs doesn't have a lot of action now. It's actually, you know, it's funny that he cleared his dagger here too, so there's no card draw from Harrison Jones or anything.
That would have been pretty great. Not only with that play, not only clears the board, but it puts a lot of pressure on his opponent. Plus, he has the swipe, or rather the sap in hand. So any taunt that comes down this turn will just be returning to Thijs's hand.
You know, I think another thing he might be trying to do with this is get something like a Force Nature out of Thijs's hand to set up lethal next turn, so he can drop anti-Keelbot and really seize a lot of tempo on the board. Like if Thijs is concerned with maybe a Sludge Belcher hitting the board and not being able to get the damage out of Force Nature again, I think that's like a very minor consequence of taking this aggressive stance this way, but certainly a possibility.
I think this turn is just all about which 5-drop you want to use, but I think right now it's, whoa, very aggressive.
Yeah, I like going for charge here. Putting your opponent into a swipe range, I think, is really important. Because now his draws to get lethal are Savage Roar, Force of Nature, Druid of the Claw, and Swipe.
Another aspect of this charge is that your opponent actually can't sap this. Unfortunately, Eviscerate is drawn from Savjz, and
yeah,
that's going to be
really
pretty much
draw.
the perfect draw.
I cannot imagine anti-Keelbot not coming down this turn.
Savjz is thinking of some ways to weave in the Tinker Sharp Sword Duel, but I don't think that's possible right now.
This turn is just not... I mean, you're dead to so much stuff, you have to anti-Keelbot. But this game is actually looking really good for him after this. Because next turn he's got Sap and then the Tinker Sharp Sword Duel afterwards.
Just looking at Thijs's reaction there to the anti-Keelbot, and not really too much of a flinch, not much reaction. Just shows how experienced Thijs is.
Yeah, he's aware that this card is in this list very often. Dr. Boom gets drawn. I actually think I think it's lethal.
Can Thijs do anything here to prevent lethal?
I don't think he can. The only thing he could do to prevent lethal would be to Sludge Belcher and hope his opponent doesn't have Sap.
Yeah, so much pressure on the board.
I mean,
now.
I guess to prevent lethal, he could he do nothing? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. No, he couldn't even do nothing because he could just kill him with Blade Flurry afterwards.
That's pretty funny.
He actually has no way to prevent lethal from happening on Savjz's side of the board, so Savjz is going to tie this game up.
Yeah, just that key card, anti-Keelbot, plus that key draw of Eviscerate was allowed Savjz to pretty much stabilize. This game looked so bad for Savjz at the start. He was drawing pretty badly, and his opponent had such a strong field, but just a couple of good top decks, the Blood Mage Thanos, along with the Fan, plus the Eviscerate, allowed Savjz to actually make this a really good game.
You know, the Eviscerate really... I think it really kind of started to steal this game, but I think a bigger play this game was the fact that he actually chose to pay 5 life to kill a Lotheb and put himself at risk to a couple combinations instead of choosing to kill it with, say, his 3/3. Instead, like taking the option to pay 5 points of life so he could keep his 3/3 on the board really ended up making a big difference in how much damage he was able to deal. Because you saw that, I mean, he was only 3 damage over the limit, and that SI7 agent bought him about 6 to 9 damage. In that game.
Yeah.
That was really the difference, was having the foresight to use his life total as a resource despite the fact that he was already so low to put pressure back on Thijs.
Yeah, sometimes in Hearthstone, you just have to use the tools that you're given. And Savjz saw that he had 2 Blade Flurries in his hand. He saw that he had Anti-Keelbot in his hand. So he was like, oh, I can just pay life, use the Anti-Keelbot next turn, and just use my first Blade Flurry because my second Blade Flurry is not very valuable right now. So using exactly what he had, drawing some pretty good cards, having a pretty good, decent luck, exactly what Savjz needed. And Savjz played so well that game, I have to say, credit to him.
Mind you, this is also, he beat a turn 2 Pilot Shredder, turn 3 Pilot Shredder without having a Deadly Poison or value from an SI7 agent or a backstab or anything like that.
Oh,
It's
man.
just good play. What a heads up play, man. That's like, I mean, I'm genuinely impressed. That is certainly a play I think that most people would not have made.
Now, Thijs, he's gonna queue in his Rogue against the Mech Mage. Unfortunately for Thijs, again, Rogues just haven't been doing too well in this series in the fact that they haven't gotten the coin yet. 2 out of 2 games they've started as player 1.
Having coin is certainly, I think Rogue is one of the classes that really, really benefits from having coin. I think there are a lot of classes and decks are very often built in a way to where the coin is beneficial, but Rogue I think is one of the classes that just functions so much better when it has the coin than when it doesn't, that you actually just want the coin every single time.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's matchup dependent. I think you just want the coin every single time.
Yeah, fortunately for Thijs though, Savjz's hand isn't that great. He can somewhat curve out well, but Mad Scientist, when you already have a mirror image, that's kind of a little risky right now, because if you draw the second mirror image, it's going to be so devastating. Plus the Neutron, it's a 2-drop, but it's like probably the least threatening 2-drop that the Mech Mage has. In combination with the fact that Thijs has drawn Backstab SI Agent, even though he doesn't have the coin, he's in a really good spot, I think, right now.
Yeah, I imagine we're going to see Earthring Farseer this turn. A couple other plays available to him, though. Like, I mean, he could just clear out this board position if he really wanted to. And then he leaves himself with an SI7 agent afterwards. I really don't mind Earthring Farseer, though.
Yeah. I don't think you need to expend your like game-winning combo yet. The SI Agent Backstab combo is, of course, the most one of the best combos you can use to deal with aggressive decks.
Yep.
And this board right now from Savjz is just not threatening yet.
Yeah, I imagine this Mad Scientist would be... I'd be shocked if it didn't... this Earthring Farseer.
Yeah, you really want to trade off that Mad Scientist as quickly as possible.
Thijs also very aware that number of cards in this matchup is just so important. Like getting mileage out of everything. So to make sure that he's weaving in hero powers rather than taking a super aggressive stance. Because again, Savjz just has to... I'm sorry, Savjz understanding that he needs to get mileage out of all of his cards. Because if he chooses to just kind of go for the gusto and put everything into his opponent's face and not really to worry too much about it, Thijs is able to take advantage of so many different scenarios.
Now that's the perfect draw from Thijs.
Yep.
The Southsea deckhand. It's like one of the best counters in the entire game against Mirror Entity.
Especially when you're playing Rogue.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So much board presence being bought. And Savjz just having to go with Mirror Entity here, which again, Thijs again has another strong counter to this with the Goblin Auto Barber. So he's able to dagger up, use Goblin Auto Barber to buff the dagger, and take out the Mirror Entity with the dagger he just popped.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's one of the keys about Rogue. A Rogue against Mage, especially playing around Mirror Entity. Mirror Entity usually against some matchups, like, for example, if Thijs queued in Druid against this, almost no matter what, these Mirror Entities would have gotten huge value. But fortunately for Thijs, he had the sense to pick Rogue instead, and he had the luck to draw into these small minions to make Mirror Entity really not useful at all.
Big utilization here from his life total as well, buying him a lot of tempo. So he's lost 10 points of life, but he has a major board advantage in the process. And this is one of those spots where I think Mage ends up struggling the most, is when it gets behind on board, especially in a deck that's designed to get ahead on board as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. One of the nice things about Rogue is that the card Sprint, basically the class of the Rogue is all about getting board control early and then sprinting on turn 7 or even earlier with a preparation to get back that card advantage that you've lost from typical Rogue spells that cost little mana but do have huge effects. So this is going to work out really well. Thijs, he has board control right now, and he will be able to sprint next turn if he wants to.
Having that Steam Little Sniper in play too, he's able to dagger his opponent's minions now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always huge in Rogue. You normally can't do that as Rogue, right?
Yeah, you can't target your opponent's minions with your hero power, but now he can.
You know, when that card first came out, my thought process was like, okay, let's go through all the hero powers. Wait, only Hunter can use it. What? That's not as exciting as I thought it would be. Because we have things like piloted shredders now that drop spin wheel snipers quite often.
Wow, so he's just going to ping himself and scoop this one up. I don't blame him. He's got no answers in his hand to what's going on the board, and Thijs is just, he's not going to make a mistake from this position. So now following the 2-1 is Savjz, but Thijs's Rogue is locked up now, and he's going to have to rely on his last deck to get things done. You know what? Savjz going to queue up here, and why is he queuing it up?
Yeah, so Thijs has Druid left, right? While Savjz still has Mage, and he still has his own Druid. So I think it's still in a fairly winnable position for Savjz. Mage is going to do pretty well against Druid, so all Savjz needs to do is win the Druid mirror. And I think, wow, Wild Growth in one hand, but not the other. One person immediately has the advantage. I think Savjz is queuing his Druid right now just to get it over with. If he loses the mirror, which is the matchup he's less favored in, then he doesn't have to play any more games. He's out of the tournament. Whereas if he wins with the Mech Mage, he still has to go for a 50-50 with the Rogue. So just getting everything over.
Let me ask you this too, because he does have some information about Thijs' Druid, but he hasn't seen a ton of this yet. What difference do you think it makes in him getting more information by playing the Mech Mage first and trying to see a little bit more of this deck? Do you think it's more beneficial for the Druid side of it or for the Mech Mage side of it to get more information?
I think I think it's more beneficial actually to get information for the Druid deck, because there's certain cards like Black Knight that are just much more influential in the Druid mirror rather than in Druid versus Mage. Then again, there's cards such as Mind Control Tech that Thijs might be running that are better against Mage rather than against Druid. So there's options either way.
Just gonna go ahead and drop Mind Control Tech on 3 just to get a body on board. And Thijs' hand is looking a little clunky right now. Not a lot of action. Savjz is going to curve pretty well. Piloted Shredder, and then he's got a couple turns to pick up a 5-drop. And if he doesn't find one, he's still got Wrath.
If Thijs innervates out a 5-drop right now, I think it's not too bad, because most likely Savjz will play the Piloted Shredder on turn 4, and then he'll be able to, or rather Thijs will be able to bring out the Keeper of the Grove.
Yeah, I think Thijs is trying to get a Wrath right here to disrupt curve. And then falling back into place, but Savjz understanding the value of development. I'm going for, wow, that's a really strong draw from Thijs right now. I mean, that's about one of the best ones of this deck.
Probably, if not the best one.
Yeah. I mean, Keeper of the Grove is still good here, but I think when he sees that his opponent's playing Wild Growth and Mind Control Tech, I think he's more often thinking this is going to be a little bit of a ramp version, and is really happy to save Keeper of the Grove for potentially something like Ancient of War or Savjz.
We have seen Savjz use cards like Ancient of War in his Druid decks. He used to use a deck popularized by Dog, which was kind of a combo Druid, but it also had 2 Ancients of War, so definitely something Thijs could be aware of.
This guy's going to start trading blows with these Piloted Shredders too. None of them wants to blink first.
Now, we've seen in a recent innovation in these combo Druid decks is that players have been using Sludge Belchers in these decks. Normally, that's more of a defensive card, but I think that's more of a call to how much Piloted Shredder is so common these days. And just this Sludge Belcher deals so well with the Piloted Shredder. 3-5 against a 4-3 body? Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, it really throws sort of a wrench into things. That's been one of the problems that I've had the most, actually, is when I play with Piloted Shredder, is cards like Sludge Belcher. So if you're having trouble with Sludge Belchers, if you're having trouble with Piloted Shredders, throw in a couple Sludge Belchers. And if you're having trouble with Sludge Belchers, I'm sorry. There's not really much you can do about that.
Yeah, so Savjz just going to bypass the problem. Not going to deal with the Sludge Belcher directly at all, going to swipe it, and he's going to still save his body, his Pilot Shredder body. And now Thijs draws a card that he probably doesn't want in this matchup, and he's slightly behind on board.
Yeah, Harrison Jones is not the best one right now. I'm going to guess this is going to be 2 damage. Yep. Oh, and Millhouse Mana Storm gets summoned. Thankfully, Thijs has a way to attack it directly. And ends up with a small board lead. But now, I like that he's going for Wild Growth here, because it's going to put him closer to the 10 mana mark, where potentially, like, if you say he draws like an Innervate and a 5-drop to go along with one of these Ancient Allures, he's going to be able to play them both. And I think it's really important right now. The card draw from Wild Growth, when he's got 2 Ancient Allures in his hand, I think is almost never going to come into effect.
Yeah, I totally agree. If he had somewhat of a different hand, something like situational cards or just minions that weren't Ancient of Lore, basically, I might have questioned it a bit, but now I think with double Ancient of Lore in his hand, he's not going to be hurting for cards, so he's not going to need the extra card that you get from playing Wild Growth on 10 mana.
Yeah, Savjz, I think, really drawing this, the way that he's drawn this game changes a lot of the way he's playing. So he unveiled the Shade to take out a 2/4 to protect this big game hunter, so he just wants presence on the board right now. I would venture to say he's going to use Savage Roar this turn, just to put extra pressure on his opponent. Dr. Boom could really change that, though.
I still think you probably want to play on curve now, and you can even charge the Druid of the Claw in combination with the Savage Roar.
Right.
And having 4 minions along with the Savage Roar, I don't think you're going to get any more than that for the rest of the game, seeing what your hand is right now.
I think what he's counting is whether or not he should take out this Ancient Lore, or whether or not he should just put pressure on his opponent. So if you just go straight for face with everything, it's 8, 10, 15, plus if you have 25 damage to face. if he chose to do it this way. And putting your opponent at 1 when they have a 5/5 and you have 4 minions out is it's pretty much dire straits. Wow, he's gonna go for Dr. Boom instead.
I think Savjz at this moment, he's thinking of what are the ways that my opponent can clear it. Clear this board with 6 minions in it. And the choices there are basically Swipe, Mind Control Tech, and BGH. And I think any of those cards are just not enough. You probably need 2 out of the 3.
The other thing too is Savjz is thinking about if he dies anything here. So if Thijs has Force Nature Savjz and then Innervate Savjz, that's like one of the only ways you can actually lose the game. So he's just going to go for face with all this pressure instead. Savjz gets drawn. There's no Force of Nature, no Innervates. And Thijs does not have a very efficient way to deal with this board position. I don't really know if Dr. Boom or Savjz is going to yield a different outcome to this game. I think you'd have to go pretty deep into the rabbit hole to figure out the differences between putting your opponent at 1 and playing Dr. Boom here.
Yeah, there's just it just looks so good for Savjz either way. And as we can see from Thijs' hand, I think probably one of the 5 drops plus Swipe will probably be used. But right now, what do you even swipe, right?
I think you swipe the Shaded Extramus. I don't really know if it matters that much.
Yeah, I think you also play the Sludge Belcher because it contests a few more things. It's effectively 7 mana as opposed to, or 7 health as opposed to 6 health from the Druid of the Claw.
Boombot's hit for a total of 4, so about average. Oh, Savage Roar is interesting. Oh, he gets to clear out the Dr. Boom this turn if he does that. I think he's just gonna. Yeah, I think Sludge Belcher is still probably a little bit better. And then Savjz having trained a 4/1 instead of the other way around, and that is certainly lethal after he draws the Force Nature. I don't think he needed the Force Nature, but it certainly is lethal after that. So no, he didn't need it because he still got 13 points of damage even with just the Druid of the Claw. So not going to show the Force Nature. Yeah,
Savjz is just showing that, oh, I had lethal no matter what, so I didn't need this top deck.
The other thing, too, is that if he doesn't show this Force Nature, it still is like kind of up in the air because something that people have been doing, too, is they've been trimming out 1 copy of Force Nature, and they go with 2 Savage Roars and 1 Force Nature. And so if he chose a Force Nature here, it might put the kind of the thought into Thijs' head that maybe he's running 2 of them just because I've seen one now. And if I see one now, it's like a much higher chance I think he's running 2 than if he's only running 1.
Yeah, that's very forward thinking.
Yeah, and he may want to keep him on the mindset that like, don't think about combo going into these later turns. Like assume I only have 1s, that way I can put more pressure on you later in the game. So game 5 going to be coming up, and this is going to be Mech Mage for Savjz with Druid from Thijs.
You know, this matchup is the matchup that we've hyped up the most between Savjz and Thijs out of all the matchups today between Maz, Masan, our second match, which was, help me here.
Life Coach and Alchemist.
Life Coach and Alchemist. This is the star match of today, and I believe it's resulted in some really good games and a really back and forth series. Thijs had the lead, and then Savjz took a game, then Thijs took a game, and now we're coming down to the final game. Whereas it looked like Savjz, or rather Thijs, was ahead for most of the match. Now Savjz, I believe, is in a pretty good advantage with the Mech Mage versus Druid.
Yeah, something that could be throwing this off too, though, is that there is 2 copies of Sludge Belcher, despite the fact that this is more of a mid-range version, and sort of like you said, a nod to Pilot Shredders and more aggressive tones that people have been taking. So I'm curious to see how much that affects things, but Thijs he's going to need a much better hand in this if he wants to stay in this game.
Yeah, Sludge Belcher is really nice, but not what you want on your opening turns. You really need your Wild Growths, and speaking of Wild Growths, you need your Wild Growths, your Wraths, and Wild Growth in combination with Sludge Belcher, especially with the coin. That's also looking pretty good.
Yep. I imagine he's going to coin out the Wild Growth here, so that way he has access to Wrath on his next turn. That allows him to cleanly play in a Pilot Shredder and Sludge Belcher. If he chooses to save his coin here, what's going to end up happening is if he has to Wrath next turn, he doesn't get to Wild Growth, and that's going to throw his entire curve off.
Yeah, exactly. Not Wrathing a Mech Warper is just not something you can usually afford to do.
Yeah, it's usually a pretty risky play.
It's just like Undertaker, where if you're on turn 2 and you have a choice between Wrath and Wild Growth, you usually go for the Wrath anyway. Of course, I'm talking about pre-nerfed Undertaker.
Right.
Now, Undertaker, not nearly as threatening.
So pretty good lead here from Savjz, but Thijs just really all the answers. And now he's even got the option to pilot a Treader or to swipe here. And honestly, I think I would tend to favor swipe in this position. I'd want to shut off the possibility of stuff like Goblin Blast Mage really having high impact.
Yeah,
at least this early in the game.
Goblin Blast Mage definitely like a card that you always consider when you're playing against Mech Mage, because it's probably the quote-unquote most imbalanced card in Mech Mage for the mana, for the stats. It's just so much value, more value than most other cards in most decks.
Yeah, it's pretty tough to get more value than Goblin Blast Mage.
It's like the fire elemental of Mech Mage, essentially.
A little bit harder to set up though. But I think Shaman needs that little extra leverage right now. I think it deserves Fire Elemental. Imagine Mage with Fire Elemental.
You want Mage to be even more dominant in Arena, right?
I want it to be a basic card. Wow, really thinking about how to play against this Mirror Entity. This is actually a tough position. I think I would like to see Sludge Belcher though.
Yeah. The problem with giving your opponent the Shade, even though it's the weakest creature, is that your opponent's Shade is always going to be one. It's always going to be one stats higher than yours, because your opponent's Shade is going to grow slightly faster.
Savjz really no action here with the Azure Drake. And I would guess this 5 is going to face. That Archmage, I think, is a really important pickup right now, because these guys are going to be trading for board position back and forth very often. Harrison's got to be one of the worst draws in the deck right now.
Yeah, I think Harrison is just a nod to how common rogues are these days, but not really what you want against Mage, and not really what you want against Druid. And Thijs has been punished in both his games where he drew the Harrison Jones in those matchups as the Druid player.
Gosh, this is so tough. I don't really think he has a strong set of plays here. I think that probably Piloted Shredder and Hero Power is one of his better ones.
Yeah. Oh wow.
I don't mind the Harrison either. I mean, here's the thing. If he's going to be able to pay life, now's the time when he's going to be able to play it. So Harrison's going to contest this with Lotheb. It's going to occupy 2 mana from Savjz when he has this 5/1 on board. And so it's just going to help try to shut off everything that Savjz has going for him.
Now Savjz is almost forced to weave in a ping. And I think the play here is, just Fireball ping, get 5 more damage to face, and then force your opponent to deal with the Lotheb once again.
Now, typically, I don't like using burn spells on minions, but in a spot like this, where he's effectively making up most of the damage with a Lotheb, and then potentially making up more ground than that in future with this Lotheb, that's like really the spot where if you're going to use a burn spell on a minion, you want to use it, is to get repetitive damage out of something. So he lost something from his Fireball, but he didn't lose too much, and I think that's really his aim.
Yeah, and honestly, I think this game is pretty much over. Getting into the late game with... Oh, wow.
Yeah, see, this is what happens to me every time. Yeah, you just got a taste of my curse. Every single time a game's about to end, like a draw really changes everything. And if there's a draw that could have changed this game right now, it is definitely Big Game Hunter. So this Piloted Shredder minion, I think, is extremely important. But again, he doesn't have a clean way to answer this Lotheb right now. And that's posing a big problem.
He's actually considering trading in his Piloted Shredder. But if he trades in the Piloted Shredder, how is he going to kill this Lotheb?
Probably, I mean, I imagine he's probably going to use the Shade as well. It just doesn't really have a clean option here. Like, if he kills off this Lotheb with his 2 minions, he does get the body from Piloted Shredder afterwards. He gets a Sludge Belcher on board, and he gets a Big Game Hunter on his opponent's Dr. Boom. So Thijs is left with 2 Boom Bots, and Savjz is going to have 3 minions on the board.
Savjz still does have that Archmage Antonitis in his hand, plus the spare part, so exactly what he wants. He drew Dr. Boom, and he drew Archmage Antonitis, and I don't think you can get better for him with regards to the late game as Mech Mage.
Wow. That's not a beast. That's a Dr. Boom. There's no beast. Wow, he's actually just going to choose to take an aggressive stance here. Really trying to avoid damage to the face, too. Boombot goes for 3 there. I mean, I got to believe it's Archmage.
Archmage plus even taunting up the Archmage seems pretty good.
Do you taunt the Archmage or do you taunt the Boombot?
I think you have to use the Boombot to attack something this turn just to get off its effect and potentially kill off one of the minions.
That's why I'm thinking you could taunt it, though. It's because you're now effectively attacking with it, except you're wasting your opponent's attack. instead of the other way around. So like you're occupying 2 mana, and then you're also dealing an extra point of damage. If he plays Archmage and he taunts something, he's going to get a Fireball from the Archmage. So then he's got 10 points of damage, of direct damage between Fireball, Frostbolt, and his hero power. And Thijs is at 10 right now. So if he taunts the Boombot, either his opponent has to attack the Boombot with his face or attack it with one of the minions. So both of those scenarios are beneficial for Savjz right now. Wow. I'm really surprised by this.
You know what? This play, he gives him another spare part, so I guess he's going a little more greedy now.
This is a nod to Ancient Lore. Like if his opponent had Ancient Lore heal, that could be like a scenario he really wants to avoid happening. So trying to get some mega value out of this Boombot. Boombot goes to face. Yeah, so he's just clearing up the board here. The other thing too is he does have to think about killing minions because of the fear of Force Nature Savage. I mean, that's really a testament to how much he's thinking about it. Because in this scenario, Force Nature Savage is going to be 24 points of damage.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's 26 points of damage. Right? He's still dead to it, isn't he? 14 plus 8 plus 2. I'm sorry, 14 plus 8 plus 4. 22. Yeah, we'd still be dead to Force Nature Savage. Now I'm actually kind of confused. Maybe he's trying to play around double Savage or something like Druid of the Claw Savage.
I think he's just playing it slow right now because he's seeing that his opponent is already at 10 health. So if I just play it slow, I'll eventually be able to chip enough damage in, especially with Archmage Antonin.
That's true too. He's also if he wears it tight enough with the Archmage, he can just leverage that into being able to potentially just win the game outright.
And that's not game
quite yet,
but it's pretty close, I would say.
Yeah. Right, Savjz definitely requires Archmage's assistance right now. And Rusty Horn going to make sure this Mad Scientist is attacking. That is a terrible target for an attack right now. Wow, he's going to taunt up the Archmage too. So he's just really doing everything he can to not die to Force Nature Savage Roar. That's like the last thing he wants. Thijs is going to need to draw Ancient Lore here. Like he needs Ancient Lore. Oh my gosh! Are you kidding me? Thijs draws Ancient of Lore.
He still has to kill the Archmage Antonis though. Like if he kills the Archmage and we have to see what comes out of the Pilot Shredder. But if he kills Archmage now, and he trades so many of his minions in and trades as many minions as possible, he's actually out of cards. So after he uses his Ancient of Lore, he could still be in trouble just because Mech Mage could eventually just draw into more burn. And Thijs will also be top decking every single turn.
I think I'd like to see him innervate a hero power here.
Yeah,
I don't think he's getting much value out of this innervate at any point in the game. I mean, he would quite literally have to draw either Azure Drake or Ancient Lore next turn to even make innervate potentially playable.
He also needs he's looking for Savage Roar, I think, in the following turns, and I think it's the only way he can actually win, especially because Mad Scientist is gonna come out, and any minion that Thijs draws will also be given to Savjz.
Wow,
Savjz now, he realizes he can actually play the he doesn't have to be the aggressive player anymore. He can pretty much play the control game because it's such a huge advantage in that sense.
Wow, Druid of the Claw gets drawn. Oh my gosh, this game is so crazy right now.
Oh man.
I mean, Druid of the Claw is such a terrible play right now because Savjz has a mirror. He has a secret in play, and Thijs knows it's a mirror entity. So if he wants to play Druid of the Claw, he's going to have to charge it, lest he lose so much value to his opponent's Druid of the Claw he'd get from this.
Yeah, essentially, this is just this card basically reads: get rid of your opponent's mirror entity.
Yeah, it's just a flare that doesn't draw a card right now.
Do you think it's possible that his opponent Thijs might even consider taunting it? Would taunt have any benefits over charge at all?
Well, if he taunts it, I mean, it does have some benefits, but it's like you can lose so much value to this.
Okay, he hero powers first, so that means he actually might taunt it. There we go.
Yeah, he's taunting. Wow, and now it's back on Savjz. There are a couple draws here that are really strong, and I can tell you Noyatron is not one of them. I imagine this is going to be a ping and pass.
Now, you know what? Thijs, if he runs Black Knight, that could also be a huge draw. Wild Growth, it's okay. It cycles through your deck. and you'll probably draw another card,
Oh
another
my
minion.
gosh, if he drew Cenarius. That would be so bad. He draws Ancient of Lore. I mean, this has got to draw 2 cards.
Yeah, this is definitely the best, probably the best minion besides Dr. Boom that he could possibly have drawn. But yeah, I would have to think he draws 2 cards, but Thijs is thinking it out. He goes for the cards.
Keep for the Grove. Potentially really strong. I like the play on. I like the attack on the Noitron. Ball is back in Savjz's court. Goblin Blast Mage gets drawn.
That is huge. Yeah, I think you clear up the Druid of the Claw, go for the Blast Mage, see what happens.
Yep. Wow, that was one of his best results too.
Yeah, exactly. Now the Ancient of Lore, it can't trade into the Druid of the Claw, and that might just be game.
I don't know. I mean, I think Force Nature is about one of his only cards that can actually keep him in this. Cenarius, if Cenarius makes 2 taunts, he can kill off his opponent's Druid of the Claw, and then that's enough.
That's it. There's not even like a Piloted Shredder that Thijs can kill to potentially get a Doomsayer.
No. Okay, no, he can't live for another turn. I don't think. Oh, you know what he could do? He could Keeper the Grove, the 4/2. He could Savage Roar, put his face into the Anoyatron. He could put his Ancient of Lore into the Mechanical Yeti and draw a freezing emergency coolant. That's like one of the only ways he can survive this turn is by getting an emergency coolant.
That's really nice, actually. Does Thijs go for that?
I must safeguard.
I think he sees it.
Wow. there's 7 spare parts, right? He gets a Rusty Horn will save him for a turn as well.
Not bad.
Wow, he's gonna live another turn. That's unbelievable.
And you know what? Cenarius is coming down now.
Gosh, I mean this might turn the game.
Wow, Thijs really lucky with that spare part. It was an emergency coolant, but it was pretty much the card that he needed. But you know what? Now Thijs is pretty much on a very huge clock because he's at 3 mana. He doesn't have any other heals in his deck. And any spell that Savjz draws, be it like a Frostbolt or Fireball, it could end the game.
Savjz is drawing some of the worst cards in his deck just turn after turn right now. And you can just see he's so pained. Is he supposed to just Rusty Horn the Cogmaster?
I think you do.
Is he supposed to not attack with the Goblin Blast Mage right now?
Oh my god.
That's exactly what he's gonna do. Wait! No, okay, I think I do like the attack a little bit more, but not much. Oh my gosh, Innervate gets drawn! That's one of the worst cards in the deck right now.
Fortunately, Thijs can chain up another taunt. So we're gonna see, does Savjz draw the Fireball or Frostbolt that he needs? He has about like 15 cards in his deck, right?
Yeah, Thijs can't afford to attack. Oh my
there
gosh,
it is!
Look, gets drawn. A big sigh of relief for Savjz. I mean, this is kind of only a matter of time. He had so many turns to draw the right cards, and Savjz finally pulls it out. Wow, what a match for both of these players.
What an exciting series of games, and what an exciting final match. I mean, that Mech Mage versus Druid game was just so back and forth. It looked like Thijs might be able to eke it out in the end, but Savjz finally drawing the spell that he needed to finish off the Druid player.
Thijs finding a line that kept him alive in that turn also was like not an easy task. To have to like basically lose your entire board and all of your hand to have a chance to live for another turn is like so unbelievable. Like it's so much work you have to go through to find that one. So Thijs going to be falling short in this match to Savjz, and again in a very close one.
Yeah. You know what? I think when Blizzard designed the concept of spare parts, this is exactly what they had in mind. Like you have to fish for the correct spare part, and you have the potential for that spare part to be the exact right one to have it do just immense damage. And we can see if he gotten a different spare part, he would have lost. And if he gotten the exact right spare parts, he had a chance to actually turn the game completely around. Amazing what one spare part can do.
Yeah, designing situations where people have to navigate ranges of possibilities, I think, is really what the game's all about. And that's why I like all the kind of random stuff that happens. I think for me personally, it's exactly what I want to see from a card game. So yeah, Thijs, again, falling just short of this one. Savjz moving on. And next match we have is going to be Kolento versus Frezar. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Kolento. Had a really rough start when GBG came out, but lately he's been putting up some fantastic results. What was the tournament he just won?
He won Heroes of Cards
Yep.
2015 #1. And not only that, he also won, guess what? Kinguin for Charity Winter 2015. So he won the previous iteration of this tournament. He's back to defend his title.
Yeah, so big match coming up for you guys. But again, this is, as Monk just said, this is a charity event. It's being held for Child's Play benefit. So if you guys would like to show your contribution, you can do so with links below the stream, as well as links in chat via Moobot. Child's Play is an organization that helps provide toys and games to children in hospitals who don't otherwise have access to them. And if you'd like to learn more about Child's Play, you can do so by visiting childsplaycharity.org. If you have any predictions or any feedback or just any comments you'd like to leave, you can also do so by using the hashtag KinguinForCharity and tweeting at KinguinNet. Or if you'd like to reach Monk, he's at liquid_monk, or myself, I am at That's Admirable. So next match is going to be coming up. Guys, don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick break, and then we're coming back for the last match of the day, Kolento versus Frezar.